felt it. That ephemeral, fleeting satisfaction when we tick the things off the to-do list. And yet, I use the word ephemeral because it is exactly that. There's this subtle, superficial satisfaction that we get, right, when we tick the things off the to-do list, when it's not something connected to what feels true and real and in alignment with something meaningful. You know, kind of just like ticking things off the list for the sake of ticking things off the list to give a semblance of productivity, progress. In this video, I want to explore the two wings of productivity and how oftentimes we're only really getting told about the one side, the necessity-based productivity. And that's great. We need that wing, okay? I'm not going to try and tell you that you need to ditch necessity-based productivity because we all have households to manage, bills to pay, food to get on the table, right? So necessity-based productivity is good, okay? But that wing is exactly that, it's one wing. And if that bird only got one wing, you'll be spiraling, right? So I want to introduce as well something which is also quite simple. That being the other wing, that being love-based productivity. And not love as that kind of emotion, but love as a state of being, as a level of consciousness that we can rest in as we learn to up-level our baseline frequency, so to speak. So I've referenced a bunch the Hawkins scale of consciousness, and it's okay for us to, be in fear sometimes and be angry sometimes, but if that is our general baseline, like we are just from day to day waking up feeling angry or sad and fearful, moving through the day being fearful, angry and sad, ending the day and so on, it repeats. That's a telltale that our baseline state is resting in a space where we can't see a higher purpose. We don't see the good in the world, let's say. We don't see even sometimes the good within ourselves. So the process of even this journey of non-acceptance to love is speaking to that jump too, of raising our baseline state. So super grounded, super practical, productivity. It's all a thing that we've encountered, from the education system to moving into work and cleaning houses and tending to needs of others and ourselves, right? There's a necessity for that to be brought through. Otherwise the ship stops flowing, kind of thing, right? But there is something to it of it feeling empty, right? If it doesn't have that other wing propping up the bird. The rush fades and we're left questioning the true meaning behind it all, right? All good. Let's question it. So in this video, you can expect the things that you see in the timestamps. Okay, there are like 4 parts to this video. You can expect an exploration of even something very interesting. The necessity for restlessness to move us into a state of productivity, and then the two wings of productivity. So as I said, we're going to explore necessity-based, necessity-fueled productivity. Think survival, obligation, necessity, right? And love-fueled productivity. So think co-creation, think purpose, think truth, right? Connection. And this moves us from a state of individual ambition focused on survival exclusively to taking care of that stuff, right? And moving into a state of co-creation, of service, fueled by love. So then productivity can become a form of love, not just a to-do list, right? Not just some empty thing or a way to shop for the world, but a way to add another page to the book of the art of living, right? As an art form. So in that, we're going to explore the role of restlessness, which is typically seen as something negative and bad. And, oh no, I'm restless. I did something wrong. I shouldn't feel restless, right? And I want to introduce how that can actually be a driving force behind greatness, behind creativity, behind love-fueled productivity. Something that drives us to create and to evolve. And that leads us into the connecting to a larger purpose and what's actually required to do that, you know. Not if it's not love as an emotion, like what is this state of being? What forms part of that? The divine mirror, the muse, co-creation, things like that. So let's hop into it. So I first want to explore the necessity of restlessness. An interesting beginning. I have a quote from a really incredible human. I don't have a bio for him, but I followed this guy's work for a little while. His name's Michael Tsarian, and he wrote this really awesome article, which I read a little while ago, called Contrarium. And he coined this term to speak to that perpetual innate state of restlessness that moves through reality, and that is a feature, not a bug. And actually, this state of restlessness is what spurs creativity in creation. Creation being everything that we know and what we don't even know because we can't perceive it. But as that not being a noun, that not being a fixed, stagnant thing, that being a verb. Okay, we're a verb. We're a being and a doing. We're not an it, right? So the quote goes, and there are a few of them, so bear with me. It's just so juicy. I had to put them all in. Okay. It goes like this, quote, as Meister Eckhart, Jacob Boehme, Isaac Luria, and other sages envisioned it, disharmony is the root of all being. The ground of spirit is not harmony and peace, but duality, disequilibrium, and restlessness. If it were otherwise, we'd have no creation and life as we know it. Consequently, the agitation within man is not experienced by man alone. On the contrary, it is an indelible attribute of spirit itself. Spirit, the universe, all. Man's psyche is restless because restlessness is the hallmark of his creator. End quote. And this restlessness is the contrarium. So continuing on, these are some very digestible, tangible examples of this contrarium, this restlessness, aka polarity, and that tension between the two, right? So it goes like this, quote, the proof for the presence of this contrarium is to be found everywhere. Its primary physical manifestation is found in the starkly obvious dyad of male and female. It also manifests in a multiplicity of other phenomena. The divided brain, right, left and right hemisphere, consciousness and unconsciousness, being and becoming, desire and will, matter and antimatter, strong force and weak force, masculine and feminine, life and death, existence and non-existence, time and eternity. It accounts for why we have age and youth, night and day, black and white, light and darkness, right and wrong, good and bad, inhale and exhale, flex and reflex, inside and outside. We have thought and action, thinking and feeling, conscience and superego, knowledge and ignorance, understanding and confusion, ordinary and extraordinary, literal and metaphorical, real and unreal, sorrow and happiness, optimism and pessimism, despair and hope, comedy and tragedy, waking and sleeping. And so the list goes on. I won't name all of them because there are a lot. Coming down to some of the last ones he wrote. Particle and wave. Zeros and ones. Being and beings. Immanent and transcendent, temporal and eternal, spirit and matter. Observer and observed. So it goes ad infinitum. End quote. Phew. That's the basis of the reality that we know. It's the root of everything that we know. Does that reframe restlessness already, even just that? Like what spurs an act of creativity if there isn't this impulse? If there was no drive to evolve, that drive in the form of this slight restlessness, this slight agitation, this slight, I don't just take things as they are. There's possibility and potential here. Like we're all alchemists in ways. So restlessness is so often misunderstood as an anxiety or dissatisfaction. And that being a bad thing, whole and complete in itself, that's a bad thing. Like, well, you know what? F that, black and whiteness. Like, sure, anything in the extreme, ain't it? Too much anxiety, too much dissatisfaction, like it throws the whole system out of balance, yeah. But a little drop of dissatisfaction, maybe even a bigger drop of dissatisfaction, great. Gets you out of that job you hated for years. Gets you out of that situation that you've just decided to stagnate in, That restlessness is necessary sometimes, yeah? You would agree with that, surely. Something's happened in your life where you're like, you know what, if I didn't feel dissatisfied, I could have just stayed in a bad situation. So honor that as well, yeah? So that force, that impulse, this is the engine of all of evolution. It's a dynamic force that drives us to move forward, to act, to challenge the status quo within our even own mind. Like challenge why we're just complacent or thinking this is all that there is, despite also kind of knowing that that's totally false. Without restlessness, this impulse, there would be no movement, no life as we know it. And we live in a world that often tells us to just tranquilo, calm down, 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 to find peace, to be balanced. And oh yes, we need that. Oh yes. But that also ain't all it. That's one wing, so to speak. So you also kind of need a little bit of things to shake stuff up, right? You need that spontaneous catalyst of something. And astrologically, that's more associated with the planet of Uranus. So restlessness, may you not demonize it. May you not demonize this slight agitation, this slight urge to look at things a little different, to change the way that you show up in the world, to shift that out of that workplace and start to pursue a thing that genuinely activates some kind of heart fire. Relationships, right? It's any area of life. So it's not only normal that you experience that, it's from time to time very necessary. When I studied literature in school, there was this beautiful teacher that I had in one of the classes, and in the literature class, she was a lit teacher, if I need to explicate that. And from the beginning of the time with her, she laid it out that every single class, we had to sit in a different seat, because she said, with the restlessness comes creativity. So may you remain restless, she said, something like that. And I was like, damn, how radical. And it was cool. It just kept things present. You know, you didn't just rock up into the class and go sit in your same seat and not question it. It was like, okay, what's the energy of the room today? Where am I feeling called to sit? And that sitting in the different spot, you access literally, not even just metaphysically, like metaphorically, literally you access a different perspective of the room. You see different sides of people's faces, and that, as above, so below, as within, so without, reflects your own psyche being able to access different vantage points, not only to analyze a text, but to carry that forward in your life. Great life skill. Such a life hack. I adored that. So that's also a little sprinkle to contextualize what I mean. I have another quote here from our good friend Michael, and he says this: according to the mystics and idealists, this disequilibrium is not a bad thing or something to be lamented. It is the reason for the rise of sentient and non-sentient life, and for consciousness. Self-consciousness and our ability to question the meaning of existence would be impossible without it, end quote. Totally. If that slight agitation wasn't there, we would just be robots. We would just take things as they are, and there would be no individuality. There would be no spark of creativity, because it would just be sameness, right? There is a reason from the one we became the 2 and 3 and 4 and XYZ, right? So again, restlessness is a universal force. It's not just a human trait. It is a trait of the reality as we know it. It is a trait that led to evolution. It exists in the fabric of the universe, from the tiniest particles to cosmoses, right? And how beautiful to even just invite a little bit of a perspectival shift there, where you can maybe lean a little bit more into that state of restlessness and be like, maybe this is something I need to just dial up a little bit and see what that is, that impulse is inviting me to shift or look at differently. We can say that restlessness is this gap between so-called opposites when new possibilities are born, the space between even thinking and feeling. It's like, where does thinking end and feeling begin? There's this beautiful interplay that happens here which births something new, where if you think a thing and feel a thing, that's like, that imbues whatever you're doing with more meaning, right? That's the whole premise of even prayer and intention. It's not just thinking a thing, it's pairing the thought with the feeling. And then it carries more weight, right? And so everything is birthed from unity into duality. Life and death, light and darkness, right? These tensions drive the continuous dance of existence. There's also a really beautiful quote here that I have from Nancy Stark Smith, who was one of the pioneers of this incredible dance improv movement called contact improvisation. You might have heard of it. I am not even low-key obsessed, I'm like high-key obsessed with contact improvisation. So I highly recommend you look up some videos of it. I digress. Nancy says, connected to what we're speaking about with this tension, and this is from her work with contact improvisation, and also this thing she does called the underscore. I won't go into that now. That is beyond the scope of this video, but just to provide some context for you. So she says this, quote, "Difference is a form of connection. Tension is also a point of connection rather than something that is bad or needs to be resolved." End quote. Juicy. Juicy, juicy. Like, may all these things just reframe the way that you look at certain things, where maybe you would be labeling something as bad. The tension is bad, the restlessness is bad, and be like, yo, this is a form of connection. This is trying to connect me to my heart or connect me to truth, right? Amazing. So if it wasn't clear already, this energy of restlessness, this universal force of creation, this impulse to evolve and change and grow, this pushes us toward action, creation, right? The spark of life that pushes us to question, to evolve, to co-create, to self-reflect, to question the meaning of why we're doing what we're doing, why we think what we think, right? It's the force behind all action, whether on a micro or macro scale. So what restlessness is not is a flaw or a weakness. It's a feature. It's a feature of all this. And it's something we can use consciously, right? We can lean into consciously, dial it up a little if we need to, but also know when it's time to allow ourselves to be in peace, yeah? Because that impulse to evolve will always be there. And sometimes we need to kind of rest a little bit because life ain't all that all the time, you know? So it's not something to be demonized or denied. May you, even just with that, see restlessness more as a creative fuel. So rather than suppressing it, it can be something to be embraced, right? That tension, so to speak, can be leaned into to ignite some kind of spark of creativity, right? Your unique essence can come through and drive you forward to being productive, even if it's necessity-based productivity, even if it's love-based productivity, or both together. That is part of it, okay? So this moves us on into speaking about that first so-called wing of productivity, necessity-based productivity. So what happens when we approach productivity solely from a place of pure necessity, obligation, survival? Well, I kind of gave it away in the answer, the question. It is survival. We get anchored in survival mode. And sure, like, oh my God, I've been in survival mode so long. It's a thing, okay? And Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at that pyramid, like, we got to sort out the base of the pyramid, otherwise we can't vision, we can't connect to higher purpose, yeah? So, needed. But not to just perpetually rest there. And this could be sounding like a very privileged thing to say, like full acknowledgement that for some folks, like survival mode is the reality day to day, indefinitely. And I truly hope we will ultimately live in a world where that is not the case. But for the sake of this video, and the fact that you are watching this means that you at least could afford a device, okay, of some sort. And I'm not assuming that you are totally sorted, that you're super rich, no worries in the world, like not assuming that at all. But I'm wondering, how in survival mode consistently are you? Like, are your actions always governed by the sense of, whoa, like obligation, like pressure, financial pressures, societal expectations, fear of failure, and so on? This can dominate our approach to life, even outside of a work context. You know, even if you come home from work, and that energy can still be there. So necessity can drive action, absolutely, though it does often anchor us in the survival mode if that necessity isn't also woven with a sense of love and joy and purpose. And that survival mode, like, that's like blinders. We often can't access a higher state of creativity and love when we're in that mode. Think of it, if the channel is super compressed and tight because it's in survival mode and it's high tension, high pressure, high stress, there's not much room for energy to flow through that channel, right? Compared to, you got the survival base of the pyramid down pat, you can move into the higher levels, and in terms of the image that I gave of the channel, things start to open a little more. There's more room, okay? So Totally not demonizing survival mode. It's necessary. It's the base, okay? Root chakra, if you want to think about it in that term. Though that's also not where we stop, ideally, because we can be limited by self-interest and disconnected from a relational or higher purpose, and then that leaves us feeling kind of unfulfilled, right? Like we're just ticking off the things on the to-do list and that's life, rather than a connection to, okay, but who are you? Like, what is the thing that lights you up? What is the thing that makes your heart sing? And do you have space to lean into that? Yeah. So necessity-based productivity is for external things most of the time. External demands, deadlines, meeting others' expectations, feeding family, your family, paying for bills, yeah? And it is tangible, but again, it can often lack that internal satisfaction. Again, needed, pay your bills, feed your family, and may that also be infused with love too, which we're going to speak about a little later. So the main point within that is there is a kind of bottomless bucket, so to speak, with necessity-based productivity, like always busy, but never truly fulfilled, no matter how many things you tick off the to-do list. And then we kind of chase productivity for a sake of completion, but that lasts so ephemerally. So what can we do about that? Let's now move on to talk about the second wing of the bird of productivity, which is a process of infusing love into it. And this is how we break free, so to speak, from the cycle of empty productivity, feeling like all the busyness just feels empty, right? And the key is love. And no, I don't mean romantic love. I don't mean a kind of emotion that makes your butterflies in your stomach and things like that. That's great. That's beautiful. May you experience that. But the love that I'm speaking about is a state of consciousness that encompasses truth and purpose. So, quick circling back, we got the wing of necessity, and we definitely need to harness that because we got stuff to do. We do need to survive. Okay, great. Wing of necessity. Now we have the wing of love, to ensure that our actions are grounded in something meaningful so as to make showing up consistently more authentic, more purposeful, more like it is filling a cup of some description. And we feel nourished by it. It feels generative, right? We don't feel depleted all the time. And so love, what is that? Love as authenticity. Love as an integrity, right? Your outside reflects your inside, and your inside reflects your outside, right? There's congruence, coherence there, which is authenticity. Love as in an alignment to your values. If you have a vision, to your vision. Love as in I show up even if I don't really want to, but I know that there's a higher reason why, and I surrender to that, right? Like, I don't always want to cook food for my family. If you have kids, and cool, you don't need to hate yourself for that. Great, you probably had a big day. Maybe they're in a bit of an agitated, annoyed mood. It's okay, but there's a higher reason. You step into something greater and you're like, and still, this is my role right now, and I do this with love. Even if I don't feel this like, oh wow, love, but like love, truth. Love as in I feel nourished on a soul level, despite the drudgery that is sometimes there, despite the massive effort that I need to put in, right? Nourished at a soul level. And no one can tell you what that exactly feels like except you. You have likely touched that at some point where just on some deep existential level, you just feel met. You feel nourished and moved. So, these two wings, they coexist, they overlap, they collaborate. Okay, like the yin-yang, So I'm going to put that on the screen just so you can be with this with me. So you see the black, the white dot, and the white with a black dot, and you see this beautiful curve in the middle, like a backwards S. And I have another beautiful quote from Michael, and he says this, quote, "The S-shaped wave between the hemispheres does not divide them. Rather, it marks the meeting place where polarized hemispheres come together to discover what they have in common." End quote. Where light and darkness come together and discover what they have in common. Where chaos and order come together and discover what they have in common. Right? That meeting place. Where it's not so polarized, like the necessity can't exist with the love. Like, no. Where do those two meet? Curiosity. Great place to be in. So I just want to again give you a visual download of the Hawkins scale of consciousness, so it'll appear on the screen. And I just want to invite you to just take a look at where love is resting. Yeah. So Stephen Polina defines this state of love like this. Quote, "This isn't the emotion of love, like I said before. It's unconditional love, a permanent understanding of your connectedness with all that exists. Think compassion. At the level of reason, you live in service to your head, but that eventually becomes a dead end where you fall into the trap of over-intellectualizing. You see that you need a bigger context than just thinking for its own sake. At the level of love, you now place your head and all your other talents and abilities in service to your heart, not your emotions, but your greatest sense of right and wrong, your conscience. I see this as the level of awakening to your true purpose." End quote. Beautiful, substantial, right? This state of being gives depth to your actions. So that action could look the same, preparing a meal for my family. But with love, with conscience, with presence, that same action can be imbued with something completely different, which is imbued into the food that they're eating, and they're eating that love, right? Because that could be aligned with your core value of intimacy, of love, of connection, right? Of beauty. Beauty being preparing a meal for your family with love, for example, right? So that state of love, that state of consciousness drastically assists us to live a life in alignment with our values. But that's another thing too. What are your values? No one can tell you that either. That's a big journey of self-discovery, and one that I invite you to start without making it a huge mountain. Like, just sit in quiet self-reflection for maybe even 5 minutes after this video. And just ask yourself, what do I truly value in life? I'm a visual person. I would definitely need to write that down. And in my own process, I have written that down and done double checks and various passes through. And I got to a list of 10. So also don't feel like the first things that come out of your brain and mind and heart are exactly your top 10 values, so to speak. But just be with it. See what feels most true. Maybe the next day, write down the same question. What are my values? What are my top values? Write it down. See if there are overlaps. Okay? So it's a process. The necessity within that is curiosity. Yeah. So when your productivity is grounded in and with love, it becomes a way of showing up authentically, even when it feels difficult. It becomes less about just ticking the boxes, just preparing the meal, just getting the stuff done, and more about contributing to something greater. Like, I just keep using this example because I've referred to it already. Knowing that even though it seems small and insignificant, it's just one meal out of a lifetime that you will be preparing for your family. Even just that can set up cycles in time, ripples through time, where there is more love. Okay? Where you are making it with love. where you notice that the gift of what it means to be in the position that you're in, the honor, how sacred it is that you brought this life into the world and now you're nurturing it. And with your own hands, you're creating this beautiful meal to nourish them on their journey to discover who ultimately they will be, truly, right? So it kind of gives us access to a higher perspective, right? And that's cool. That's beautiful. We need that zoom out sometimes, yeah? Zoom in for sure, but we do need the zoom out to orient ourselves. And that state of love, where you can see things as they are without labeling it as good or bad, that is that perspectival expansion. And that is amazing. Super useful. The contributing to something greater thing ties innately to interdependence. Because we, like, for example, our success, how we show up in the world, how much success we receive in the world, like, to say that that is a solo venture is completely false. There is no one who you know who is successful that has not, by some way, shape, or form, been nurtured by the nature of reality, which is interdependence. No way. You think that person would be there if they weren't eating food? They were supported by food. They were supported by the plants that they were eating, the grains. Yeah. That person came into the world from parents, so he was supported by his parents, right? To be alive, to be in that position. And hopefully those parents were also loving and supportive and nurturing. So in the formative years of his life, he was nourished and supported. And throughout school, ideally he was nourished and supported by that ecosystem. And moving into the position that they're in now, they likely had people around them, guides, mentors, teachers, right? They are standing on the shoulders of giants, even the giants being their ancestors, the giants being the land that they are living on. Success is not a solo venture. Love is not a solo venture. It's interdependent. It's an ecosystem. So just as every element in nature plays a part to create the whole, every action that we take is also part of that something larger than ourselves. And how conscious we are of that can really just imbue every action with some different quality. Knowing that for every action there is an effect, and from every effect there is another action. Cause and effect, right? Every moment we are in cause and effect. The way that we look at the world, the way we perceive the world leads to an effect, which leads to another cause, which leads to another effect. Preparing that meal with love leads to the effect of feeling more connected to your family, feeling like even though the day was a bit hard, you feel grateful, which leads to a cause of kindness, which leads to an effect of deeper connection, and so on and so on and so on. When you show up in love, as love, you become part of the greater whole. You become a co-creator because you get that this whole thing, it's working with each other. The mycelial networks in the forest bring nutrients to the trees, which helps them communicate, and the big branches of the trees create shade for the other bushes to grow, and the leaves fall onto the ground, and then that decomposes, and that's decomposed by this particular fungi, and there are these bugs that like to get all up in there, and that provides nutrients for the soil for more things to grow, so on and so on and so on. And this is love because it is true. It is whole. It is as it is. And disclaimer, everything that I say here is from the level of consciousness that I'm at now. Okay, so may everything that I say be an invitation for your own self-reflection. Don't take everything that I say as gospel. because this is from my vantage point as my channel, me. Okay, what do you think about this all? What is your definition of love, truth, purpose? And it can be totally different from mine, and that's totally cool. If I shot this film, yes, if I film this video in a year from now, likely my understanding will be different. So just hold that in your awareness as well. The piece that I also want to speak to about showing up in love as a network, right? Love as truth, truth as something whole, because truth is not one side of the coin. Truth is also the fact that there are two sides of the coin, right? So part of that truth is recognizing that within co-creation we encounter the muse. The muse being that source of inspiration. The muse being coming through in the form of a book, a quote, a video, a person, a conversation, a place. And that this quality of the muse feeds into this love, feeds into this inspiration, feeds into this love-based productivity, and provides a nice foundation for necessity-based productivity to meet. It's the platform sometimes. The muse as a catalyst of co-creation, where you recognize that you have got amazing things to offer, and also, let's say you're purple and blue, well, you meet someone and they're red and green. Dang, you get to learn about red and green. How cool. So the muse is a fundamental part of co-creation. And in the encountering of the muse, in order to co-create, everything is the divine mirror, so to speak. To be in love as a state of consciousness, which is closely connected to truth, we encounter the mirror, which shows us even sides about ourselves which we weren't aware of. It shows us about our blind spots. That source of inspiration that comes through the book, let's say, it ignites something within us that we didn't access before, but was alive in us as a seed of potential. And so that the divine mirror through the book, right? Because everything is relationship, and in relationship comes that reflection. We accept also the limits of ourself, and we don't try to just be everything. We recognize that we can't possibly be everything. And in that humbling, we access love because we access truth, and then we're open to co-creation, knowing that that person over there does red so good. I do purple fantastically. And red and purple together create an even, like a beautiful color, right? And indeed, when we act from love, and we invite others to do the same, we become a potentiator for others, right? We amplify impact, because love amplifies love, healing amplifies healing, transformation amplifies transformation, because it just becomes easier to do. You know, like all these tests of conformity where you walk into an elevator and normally people face the door, right? So beep, it opens and you walk out. But there are all these studies done of people walking into the elevator facing the back of the elevator. And if only one person does that, other people in the elevator are like, yeah, okay, weird. I'm going to face the door. But if other people, like more people, turn and face the back, then other people, they will turn and face the back, even though it's kind of weird. And so, extrapolating that, what I'm trying to speak to is the fact that one person's actions potentiates someone else responding in a similar way, right? And I mean, for good and for bad, right? But for our context, let's say, within love. And then that ripples out, right? like a teacher at school who, if you had a horrible teacher, that could have ruined that subject for you. And that could have literally shaped the direction of your life. Versus having a teacher who was so passionate, so driven, so authentic, so wanting and willing to help, that you loved that subject so much that ended up being the pathway that you took in life. One person, huge impact, right? Cycles in time as well. So, inherent in love being connected to interdependence and interdependence as an ecosystem, when we align what we do with love, we naturally consider its impact on the outer concentric circle, so to speak. Like, it's not just about self, which is the more necessity-based, right? It's more about, okay, self for sure, partner, family, community, friends, the earth, future generations. Because that space of love gives you access to a higher vantage point, more of a bird's eye, so to speak. Less about the short-term necessity-based fixation and more about what ripples in time are my actions now seeding. And again, the example of the seed, what is the quality of the seed that I am planting today? And what kind of fruit will that seed bear? Will it be prickly, bitter fruits, or will it be juicy mangoes, right? Larger perspective of time. So just some practical advice before starting any project, you can ask yourself, how does this serve life? How does this make a better tomorrow? And let this question guide some of your decisions and actions, because that shifts you out of survival and more into co-creation. So then co-creation, love-based productivity merged with necessity-based productivity becomes an offering to life, right? How beautiful. And then the key words within this whole premise of the wing of love-based productivity is aligned to values. Authenticity, right? Purposeful. Vision. Mission. Meaning, right? Co-creative. You recognize that you ain't supposed to be everything ever. You do you. Do it well. And know when it's time to be inspired by the muse in a person, in a book, in a place, whatever. Call for support. And then create something that you couldn't have possibly created alone by recognizing that you are standing on the shoulders of giants. The land that you're on, your ancestors, your family, your education, right? Co-creative. It's already there. It's already happening. And soul food. Yummy. Soul food. Just let that wash over you. So this brings us to the final part of this video, which is speaking now, coming kind of full circle, where we can speak to restlessness as the catalyst for love-based productivity, merging with necessity-based productivity. What that is saying is that we have the restlessness. There is that impulse to evolve, to create, to question, to seek support, to seek guidance. That restlessness, just taking a step back and looking at it, that can already shift us out of survival mode, out of autopilot. So we lean into that restlessness a little, zoom out, and then we notice that we're a bird and we've been looking at one wing and we got a freaking other wing. And it's like, oh, I can use this one too. So then it becomes less about, again, as I've said, the checking off of the tasks and more about how do I stop spiraling and start moving somewhere? Okay, where do I want to move? How do I know which way is the way I want to move? Oh, well, what do I value in life? Who am I? Do I feel like my outer world reflects my inner world, or do these things feel completely in dissonance? Already, that is you becoming more purposeful, which allows you to live a life more imbued with purpose, right? Purpose not as the fixed, stagnant thing over there, but as the way that you live life, the path that you're on, and how conscious you are of walking that path, and how much that path is in alignment with that soul, beautiful state, the soul food, what nourishes your heart, and what is in service to life, what is generative, life affirming. Restlessness is not the enemy, it's the fuel. It is the engine that drives us towards something bigger than ourselves. So this is the necessary ingredient for meaningful productivity, because it generates the impulse and the catalyst we need to create, to learn, to question, while love provides the direction and the meaning. Okay? So it's an essential element of growth. And from this point, when our productivity transcends ticking off the to-do list, resulting in the short-lived high, we then recognize that we can meet our needs. We can meet the needs of those dependent upon us. Also knowing that we can ask for support. We don't have to do it all alone. If we have a partner, we can ask for the support of the partner. Be like, yo, I need help. Again, preparing the meal, right? I've got to focus on this right now. And that state opens up the blindfolds. Okay, whoa, there's a network here, and we all have a role to play. And as a conscious co-creator, all right, let me lean into that. Let me ask for support. Let me attune to what my needs are and what my capacity is, and then see if that can be met by the others around me. And may we communicate that consciously, right? So then we can invest our energy in a way that contributes to that something greater. Even if that something greater is literally living day to day with a bit more love, with a bit more authenticity, with a bit more feeling in integrity. That what we say is what we do, and what we do is what we say. There's coherence. That is also a greater cause. Because of the ripple effect of everything, because we are part of this interdependent ecosystem, you living every day with a little bit more love in your life, with a sense that your authenticity is shining through a little more, that there is more attention to what you're doing, you're not just on autopilot, remember that you are still potentiating that for others so they can rest in that too. So you doing you and making those shifts is still contributing to something greater, because it's a positive influence on the ecosystem that you are intrinsically a part of. So when I say there's something greater, the greater cause, I'm not necessarily speaking about some kind of crazy big thing, you know. I'm not telling you got to go be the leader of your country, you know. It starts small. Even if it feels insignificant, it's not. Cause, effect, effect, cause, effect, effect, cause. Ad infinitum. So then the to-do list becomes the love to-do list. The actions become aligned actions. Even if it feels small, even if there's judgery, even when it gets challenging. Because we know that there's a bigger story unfolding in our life, and our energy is being invested in a generative, fulfilling way rather than just a means to an individual end. We recognize that we are part of an ecosystem, that our actions here and now do have an effect on the greater ecosystem, even if I'm not aware of it. Purposeful, conscious, loving. You feel me? So, to wrap up this video, if it wasn't clear, restlessness is part of this dance of life, not a feeling to be feared or demonized. It can really truly be a starting point for action and change to live a more fulfilling, authentic, loving life. When held with that state of love, as seeing it for what it is, not demonizing it, not labeling it, it becomes a driving force for meaningful, soul-nourishing productivity, where you can meet your survival needs and you can see the bigger picture. So I invite you to do some heart work and aligned action following this video. I have some journal prompts here for you. So in addition to contemplating what you value in life and allowing that to be a perpetual thing that you revisit, right? You don't just figure out your values and that's it for the rest of your life. Like, you revisit it. Cool. So there's that. The journal prompts are a bit more about your experience with restlessness. So they are this. Prompt number 1. What do I believe about myself when I feel restless? How do I usually respond when I feel restless? Number 3. What would happen if I harnessed restlessness as a force for growth? Right? What would happen? What would that look like? And finally, what is one thing I can do this week to infuse more love into my work? And if work wants to be replaced by into my life that feels more digestible for you, great. But what is one thing I can do this week to infuse more love into my work? Love as in truth, love as in authenticity, love as in integrity, love as in gratitude, whatever it is. Love is boundless. Yeah. What is that? An affirmation to reframe your position, reconnecting to why you show up day to day to do the things, right? So just be with that question too. And that is that, my friends. I celebrate you for being here, for gifting yourself this time to receive this information, to receive this sprinkle of goodness into your life, some perspectival shifts, I hope, for the better, for your highest good and the highest good of all. I encourage you to speak about this with some people close to you if you feel like you want to move some stuff through, right? Feel free to share your perspectives below. Something resonated with you, feel free to write it down in the comments below. I read the comments and respond to them, so go for it. And if you haven't already, like this video, that supports this algorithm game. Subscribe to the channel, and I offer a bunch of different things to also assist you on a one-to-one basis if you are looking for deeper support. So know that those resources are there and the links are below. So until next time, I wish you and all those connected to you well, and be kind to yourself.